When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Mye Kaloustian. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm Oldish, and this is our newest episode of Oldish, Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. Today, sitting down with us for a conversation is a gentleman that I met a few weeks ago when I was on my pickleball nomad journey. I met him in almost the exact center of the country. His name is Ken Ross. Ken is a successful entrepreneur, and one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to him is that in his 70s, Ken continues to be a successful entrepreneur and has just started up a new enterprise. And so we'd like to talk with Ken about how that feels and how he got here and whatever else. So Ken, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You told me when we were talking a few weeks ago that your history of having started several businesses and transferred ownership of them to some other enterprises and thought you were retired, but then somebody came along and asked you to get involved with a new enterprise. Can you give us a little bit of that history?
Sure. If maybe go back a little bit in terms of this journey, but my wife and I both became teachers of transcendental meditation back in the early 70s. And we worked full-time for the TM organization for several years. And then it came to the point where we had to start paying student loans, and the real world kind of intruded, and we both kind of entered the workforce. And I actually took one of these certificate programs in computer programming that was a very compressed 14-week program. And after that program, a couple of weeks later, I found myself working down on Wall Street as a computer programmer. And after a year at one bank, and then I went over to an organization called Salomon Brothers, which was an investment bank down the Wall Street area. At that time, I didn't really even know what an investment bank was. I just thought it was another kind of bank. And I certainly didn't realize that Salomon Brothers was probably the premier investment bank in the world at that time. And as a matter of fact, after some time, a guy came to be that my boss was a fellow named Michael Bloomberg, who took over the IT area at Salomon for a while. So in that process, it occurred to me that if I could look around and see that the people who are really advancing and doing well often had advanced degrees. And I decided to go get an MBA along the way. And fortunately, Salomon Brothers paid 100% of your tuition. I was able to go to NYU, which was a few blocks away from where my offices were. And after a couple of years, I came away with an MBA. So there I was, and I was in New York, and things were going well. And for a variety of reasons I won't get into, I decided to leave Salomon, and I took a job as the IT manager for a manufacturing company in New York City. But when this was all happening, the TM organization acquired a university in the cornfields of Iowa. It was a campus of Parsons College had gone bankrupt, and they were looking to start a university. And it was a very unique concept. The concept was the university that both taught the inner and the outer values of life, that just educating someone on the outer skills is not a complete education. Complete education is how to be happy while you're doing the outer stuff, or what we might call 200% of life.
Yeah.
And so they started that university, and people started coming and attending, and it was growing. And then some friends of ours moved out there to Iowa. Now, of course, as someone from New York, even though I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, but for someone from New York, Iowa might as well have been the moon. But the university was there. Our friends had moved out there, and they really enjoyed it. And it was a small town life. It was a different kind of thing, but people were really enjoying it. And we decided, we'd like to do that. We don't know if we want to raise our kids in a big city like New York. And we didn't have any kids at that time. And eventually we made the decision to move out there. Now, the only issue was, what do you do out there? At that time, this was a town of 10,000 people. There was one mini computer literally in the entire town that some manufacturer had in their basement. And I just didn't know how I'd support myself. But about a year before we decided to move out there, this thing called the personal computer was invented. And people started using personal computers. And I started bringing some PCs into my company and started to learn how to use them. And the first time I saw a PC, my immediate reaction was, this will change the world. It was just obvious to me that there were so many things that you just couldn't do. You could do them. They took too much time and money on mainframes and mini computers, but that the PC was a kind of a liberating element, and it was going to really change the landscape. And so I decided to take the plunge and resign from my other position, and told them I was moving to Fairfield, and I'd love to keep consulting for them. And they said sure. And we picked up and we moved to Fairfield, Iowa, in December of, I think, of 1983. And so the interesting thing was that we moved there, and a bunch of other people moved there, and typically people from the East Coast and the West Coast. And it was a very small Midwest town, and it was basically an agricultural economy. The only jobs really were, working in retail or working in the ag field, or maybe for the post office or the government. There really wasn't much of an other economy. A few manufacturers there as well, and some good-sized manufacturers, but that was pretty much the economy. And so, but all these people arriving from the East Coast and the West Coast, which often had college degrees and some interesting experience. It was an incredible study and cauldron on how you take human capital and put it someplace where you wouldn't think you could develop an economy. And over the years, it actually exploded into this massive entrepreneurial economy and success story that eventually the governor of Iowa called Fairfield the economic and entrepreneurial superstar of Iowa. Not compared to Des Moines, but for a small to take. There's so many small towns in Iowa that are bereft. As the ag economy has concentrated farms into larger and larger farms, there are fewer and fewer small farms, and all these small farming towns are devastated.
Yeah, I could see that driving through.
So, were people coming in from all over because of the new university?
Yes, it was the university that was attracting people. A lot of people were going to school at the university, and the university eventually became fully accredited, had BAs, masters, PhD programs, and to this day, I think we have 2,000 students today. So the university was very successful over time, became very well respected. And certainly was a driver of the economy as well. But there were a lot of people who came there not to go to school, but just to live in the town because there was this intentional community, a community of people who were like-minded, that again believed in the development of a balanced life and didn't just want to focus on only the material side of life, which is important and it's good and has its own values, but it's just not the whole story. And so to go and move someplace where we had a school that taught meditation to the kids as they were growing up, and they practiced meditation twice a day. We had lots of organic restaurants. We had a lot of focus on sustainability and those kinds of things. And so it was attractive to people who wanted to live those values. But the challenge from day one is, how do you make a living there? If you're not working for the university or going to the university, how do you do it? And so that's the background of where I landed in 1983 in a small town with these computer skills, some knowledge of PCs, but PCs were just kind of starting out, and deciding to take the plunge and make that move and really not have any idea how I was going to really support myself.
Well, that takes
So
courage.
you decided to go as being part of that intentional community then.
That's correct.
Yeah. Because I wondered if you were going there for a job with the university, but it sounds like that wasn't the case.
No, I had thought I had lined up some consulting clients, and I had 3 or 4 that I would do PC work for. And one of them, I said, "Oh, I have a nice country home in Iowa. I like to go there and work on these projects, and then I bring them back to New York." Yeah, I didn't want to tell anyone in New York I was moving to Iowa, because their eyes would explode and what. But the idea that I had a little country house, they could understand that. And so one of my first clients, a typical project would take 6 or 8 weeks, and I could work on it remotely, and then I'd come and install it, in New York, and I still kept my apartment in New York, for a while. So, and what was interesting is that, you really could. It was just starting to happen enough, and people were adopting PCs at a fast enough rate that all of a sudden companies were willing to pay consultants decent rates. In the early days, they thought of the PC as a toy, and now we're not going to pay somebody, to play with this toy. But then they started seeing its real utility. How you could do things that it would take years on a mainframe, and you could get it done in a few months. So I started having some consulting work, and eventually I had 5 people working for me as computer programmers. And one of my clients was a company called Integrated Resources, and they were a large real estate partnership firm, back in the 80s. And I did some work for the micromanager, who was a young guy. All the people in that industry were young at those days, including myself. And when I first did the first project for them, he had 5 PCs in his company. This is a large company. And then within a year, he had about 50. And then he was projecting over the next couple of years, he'd have a couple hundred. And because people were asking for them left and right. He came to me one day and said, this is actually becoming a challenge to track and manage these. When I had 4 or 5, I knew what boards were inside them and how much memory they had and all those kinds of things. But now, they're just all over the place, and they get changed and they move. And, do you know any software that can manage that? I said, I'll take a look. So I found some package. I was a PC-based package, but it really wasn't very good. He didn't like it. And I said, I have an idea. What if we develop this together, and then I get the rights to market it to other companies when we're done? And he brought that to their management, and they said, great. We think that's a fine idea. We have no problem with that. And we started on that journey. And then my friend left the company. So it kind of stalled. And for about a year, I was saying to myself, this is just a crying need. There's no question in my mind that there's demand for this. And then, but my other self on my other shoulder said, yeah, but there's probably already a dozen people developing it. You'd waste your time if you spent it. But after a year, I met someone in Fairfield who had some computer background also, and had some investment capital. And he thought it was a great idea. We partnered, and we started a company called the Atrium Information Group. And I kept my job, working 2 jobs, this job and that job. And but over the next year, we hired a bunch of programmers, and we spent a year developing this software called the Micro Resource Manager, which was the first set of professional tools for large companies to track and manage their PCs as a corporate resource. Where they are, buying them, acquiring them, disposing of them, depreciating them, everything that you would do, that you would need to do to manage hundreds or even thousands of PCs. And our first trade show was at this new facility called the Javits Center in Manhattan. It was their first trade show, had just opened, and the PC Expo was their first show. And so we showed up there. We built our own booth because we couldn't afford one of those expensive portable booths. Everything was on a shoestring. Had 6 of us sleeping on the floor in my apartment because we couldn't afford the hotels. And we set up our booth, and then the lights go on, and we had no idea if anyone had the slightest interest in what we're doing. And we just talked our heads off for 3 days in a row. We were all virtually hoarse by the end of that time. And to make a long story short, within 3 years, we became kind of the industry standard for that. We had 1,000 clients, and we were acquired by Computer Associates, which at that time was the number 2, the second largest software company in the world. So it was kind of your entrepreneurial dream happened over a 3-year period. We took huge risks. We worked our butts off, and it happened.
That's a success story where you had this awareness of a need, and you kept at it, and you were correct about the awareness of the need. You were also probably correct about there were a bunch of other people doing it, but that's not an easy task. There's a lot of moving parts in the software that you ended up building. And so it's not necessarily an easy task, and it requires more than one kind of brain in it. So you were in a good position given the market at that point. And there were still, of course, this sounds like this was still pre-actual Windows and any good networking kinds of stuff, which would have made it maybe a little bit easier.
Yeah, we actually did end up having a multi-user version. Of course, our first version came out. It was about a $5,000 product. And then we developed a very inexpensive version that we just put a limit on how many PCs you could use. And we felt that people would grow out of that. Then they'd upgrade to our higher level version. And then towards the end of year 3, we came out with a multi-user version that was a $10,000 product. And that was based on Novell at that time. And and then one of the things that really paid off for us is we wrote this software in a application development environment called Progress. And Progress could be easily ported to multiple operating systems. So once we had the PC version, a couple of years later, we had a version for VAX, the DEC VAX environment. And we could have done other Unix kind of things. And that vastly increased the value of our company to Computer Associates because they sold in all those markets. So we made some good choices that paid off for us.
Oh, yeah. It's a funny thing, though. This isn't really all that long ago, but you mentioned at least 2 or 3 companies in there that were giants at the time that don't exist anymore.
It's really interesting. Exactly. It's like Xerox and Kodak and whatever. But there were some, and of course, WordPerfect, if you're talking about, and DBase 3, which I was an expert in, all those things disappeared. So, look at the big guys and say, oh, they were in the right place at the right time. No, they were in the right place at the right time and worked incredibly hard and made really smart decisions because there was a ton of competition and people who just disappeared who were exactly in the right place at the right time too.
So presumably you moved on from that to something else after you sold it to Computer Associates.
That's right. I actually, of course, the natural inclination for me was to do something again in the software arena. And I found an interesting product that I thought could really be grown. There was somebody who also had a product and programmed in Progress that I met at a Progress conference, but we never could come to an agreement on working together. And just right around that time, a friend of mine brought me an interesting business plan about a company down in Texas that was putting UPS shipping centers into supermarkets. And if you remember back then, you're talking about 1990 now, that UPS did everything it could to discourage consumers from using its service. If you wanted to ship by UPS, you had to find this UPS shipping office, typically in an industrial area in the backside of town, and they might be open from 2 to 4 o'clock. And if you're really nice to them, they might accept your package. They just absolutely didn't care about consumers. So the whole idea that you would make that available in the most convenient place possible, the supermarket, where people are going an average of 2.1 times a week, sound like that's an interesting plan. And with my friend, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll help to finance this acquisition. We'll work together. I'll be the CEO, you'll be the president. And I'm going to do this for about 6 months, and then I go back into the software field. Well, I ended up doing it for 10 years. So, and over time, we eventually had over 4,000 locations and over $15 million in revenue. And we were shipping millions of packages a year. And we had locations in 49 states. And we ended up selling our company to a company called Mye in the year 2000, which was the height of the .com explosion. And because what we had created was not, and I felt this was the play from the beginning, was not just a bunch of individual locations, but as you got a network of locations, there was value that was created with the network far beyond just the individual location. So, for example, we had a program with catalog companies like Victoria's Secret and Spiegel and a bunch of others, where people could return products to the supermarket through our service. And in case of Spiegel, the returns were free, and we just ended up billing Spiegel for the return, and the consumer could just take that item, bring it into our store, drop it off, and leave. It was incredibly convenient. And so, but then as the .com thing was exploding, it seemed, this is interesting because there's a real issue with the last mile in e-commerce. Yeah. How do you get product to people's houses, economically? And this is, of course, before Amazon basically solved that problem with massive scale. But in those days, a typical UPS delivery to a business was 6 packages at a time. To home, it was 1 package. So the cost of delivering to a home was massively more than to businesses. And we started thinking, wow, we could create a network of not only shipping centers, but return centers. And we actually were purchased by a public company called Neopost Online. And Neopost is a French company that invented the postage meter. And they'd been around for 150 years, whatever it was. And they saw this company, they saw 2 companies, eStamps and Stamps.com, go public, and they both had billion-dollar valuations. And Neopost, with a massive business, in Europe, was worth $800 million. And they said, "This is crazy. We're going to go to the United States. And we have all this technology for electronic postage. It had great technology, better than these other guys had. We're going to set up shop there. We're going to go public, and our online division alone is going to be worth $1 billion." So they came to America, and it just so happened that we were doing a program with their American division, and they heard about us, and they acquired us. So we thought, this is very exciting. On paper, it looked like, we took all stock. We were so confident in how much it was going to be worth. And 6 months later, .com thing collapsed, and they basically folded up shop, went home, and we ended up with nothing.
Wow. So how did you, one of the businesses you told me about had to do with certifying products, agricultural products as GMO. So how did you get to there?
Well, a few years after PackageNet went down the tubes, and I should say I did have another little interesting I'll tell you one more quick story of my third business that happened before the non-GMO project business. While things had dissolved with PackageNet, and that's the way it goes sometimes. I've been wearing these orthotics that a chiropractor in town had recommended for me. I have very, very flat feet. I mean, 0 arch, as flat as a foot can be. And I've been wearing orthotics, and they'd saved me in terms of sports. when I was in my 20s. If I played basketball, got to the point where I was virtually crippled the next day. My back and my knees were, killing me. And so someone told me about orthotics. I got accustomed to orthotics. They were $300-400, which back in the 80s was a lot of money. And but when I came to Fairfield, there was this chiropractor who said, "No, I have a much better orthotic for you than those." And it's a completely different theory of orthotics. And in standard theory, they take a custom mold of your foot, and then they make a leather orthotic that matches that. But typically, most people's feet are misshapen, and that's the problem they're having, and why they're having problems with their knees and their ankles and their back, all that. And so this other theory was, let's create the orthotic that's the perfect shape for that your foot should be in. And it turns out, because your feet have 26 bones in them, that they will actually mold to this orthotic over a period of 2 or 3 weeks. And then you'll be having the perfect shape that your foot should have, rather than kind of memorializing, the wrong shape. And so I tried these orthotics. They were great. Really liked them. Wore them for several years. And one day I went back to my chiropractor and I said, I think I need a new pair of these. They're just kind of worn down. They were made of plastic, so they lasted a long time, but they do wear down eventually. And he's kind of writing out an order. He said, "By the way, Ken, these have gone off of patent." I said, "Really? That's kind of interesting, because there's like $1.25 worth of plastic in here. And I know you charge me $150. And I know there's stores out there that charge $250 for this same orthotic." I said, "That's kind of interesting."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I have a friend who's in the direct response industry. I'm going to tell him about this product and see what he thinks." So I call up my friend, and he was one of the real pioneers in direct response. He had sold hundreds of millions of dollars of product, really understood the infomercial industry. He was one of the good guys who sold real products that really were typically healthful products. And he said, "That's kind of interesting. Most people have tried foot stuff and it hasn't really worked in direct response, but this is a little bit different." And he said, "Let me think about it." And he went out, he did some research. He went to these state fairs where people sold this particular orthotic called the Alzner orthotic, after Dr. Alzner, who invented them. And he saw people were snapping them up at $150, $200 each. And he said, "We're going to do a test." And to do a test costs $400,000. He says, "You have to create the infomercial, and then you have to run it and buy time. And if you don't do it all the way, you have no idea if it would work or not. And so this is a huge risk." And so we came to an agreement, and I had some small royalty, and he did the test. He called me up one day and I said, "How'd the test do?" He said, "Yeah, it did pretty good. Hey, by the way, are you and my partner, the chiropractor, we both had an interest in this. You guys interested in selling out your interest in this?" I said, "You think I was born yesterday?" And it was a huge success. We've sold over 5 million pairs over the years. And so it's just, one of these things where I did far better for about 3 months worth of work than I did for the 10 years I did a package net. And that's just the nature of business, the nature of life, and the nature of nature. And they still sell them to this day. But for about 2 years, it was the #1 infomercial on TV.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a huge, big success and changed the entire foot and orthotic industry. We put this whole chain of good feet stores into bankruptcy because they were selling what we were selling for $19.99. They were selling for $250. And then eventually Dr. Scholl's got into orthotics. And everybody. So but it made the orthotic accessible to people of more modest means. Nurses, firemen, whatever. We had incredible testimonials in our later, infomercials from people who just changed their lives, and it was a real thing, and because it changed my life. and I knew it was real. So that was just another step in that journey where just out of nowhere, just that's interesting. Let me call my friend, see what he thinks.
Yeah.
And
well,
yeah,
that's all part of the story of Fairfield, I would think, is that you're kind of at a nexus there, and if you're doing the right thing, the universe will support you. That's what I always heard. So it seems like there's a certain amount of that involved in that, and you're there. You have a good heart, and your heart is growing, and so the universe is rewarding you for that.
Yeah, I certainly believe in that, and I think I've had many experiences of that were pretty profound, that I would call supportive nature, where you can say being at the right place at the right time. Yeah, that's part of it, but there's some deeper, more profound working of the laws of nature that kind of support you or don't support you for various reasons. And I feel that I've been pretty blessed in that way, that I've had tremendous good luck and support of nature.
That's good.
So this, again, was not, was an aside for me. Of course, not the thing that I normally do, and nothing to do with my previous experiences, but just was interesting how nature just organized this thing to happen, and it happened just as my other company was closed down, and then this thing came up, and basically supported my family for a few years.
I was struck by your comment a little bit ago about a belief in a balanced life. And I was just thinking about, if you had not been open to what might come your way, you might have responded to some of these opportunities as, well, that's out of my wheelhouse. I don't have any interest in orthotics. I work in computers and all of those things. But, the fact that you were open to, I wonder what that is. Why is that coming into my horizon at this moment, seemed to make a big difference in the direction that you've gone in at different points in your life.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think meditation in all its forms creates a certain flexibility in your nervous system to more easily kind of go with the flow and be more open to new experiences, and to be a better, more balanced integrator of both the big picture and the detail level. And so that the ability to change directions and go somewhere that maybe you're not as familiar with or comfortable with, and just absorb the laws of nature of that industry or that field or that business. I think it cultivates that.
Yes. And isn't that fascinating about meditation, that in the moment or even in the practice over time, it's not showing us, now your brain is becoming more flexible, and now you're becoming more able to respond to new paths. It happens, and we see it as our life goes in those directions. So I'm
Absolutely.
wondering about, I don't know where you are as you're sharing your journey around as far as your age, but what you're saying makes me think about being oldish and, the gift of meditation over all those years in preparing you for this phase of your life. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, because I know you were kind of taking us through what's happened over time, but that's either something to talk about in this moment or to bring back in.
Yes, let's come back to that, because the next,
Okay.
my next kind of experience is, I think, relevant, and it's the position where I went. I started in 2013, so I would have been about 63, and that takes me up to the present. So around 2004, a friend of mine in Fairfield, who was a PhD in microbiology, asked me to join the board of his company, which at that time was called Genetic ID. And Genetic ID was the first lab in North America to test for genetically modified organisms. And they were the first company then to create a certification standard to verify that shipments, let's say, of corn or soy were non-GMO. And that was very important because the European Union did not allow GMOs into the EU. I mean, technically they did, but if you did, you had to label them, and if you labeled them, no one would buy them. So everyone in Europe wanted non-GMO corn and soy. So we created the first standard for certifying that was the case, and we became the kind of global standard for doing that. So that was about the time when I joined the company. And at that time, of course, I had no background in agriculture or food safety, which is somewhat related to what they were doing. But John, who was a brilliant scientist, Dr. John Fagan, also needed someone who had more business experience and business acumen to take his company, to the next level. And there were a couple of things that were clear to me at that time, one of which was that we needed to diversify away from just doing just GMO testing and certification because it wasn't that big a market globally, but also that there were more interesting things we could probably do with the skills and the knowledge that we had as a company as global experts in that field. So I ended up joining the company as CEO in 2006, and very quickly saw that in order for us to get to the next level, we didn't have the capital internally to grow and on our own. So we ended up raising about $4 million in additional capital, both from a small kind of friends and family round, and then through a formal venture capital raised. And right around that time, we were talking with Whole Foods. We were talking with United Natural Foods, which is the largest wholesaler of organic and natural foods. And everyone was grappling with this issue of, how do I verify that a product is really non-GMO? If I get a product that has 30 ingredients in it, how do I know which ones may or may not be GMO, what ones that claim that they're non-GMO, but maybe they aren't non-GMO, and I have more and more customers kind of asking about this. So the issue was starting to kind of raise up in the consumer's mind. It still was not quite there, but people were starting to ask those questions in stores. And to make a long story short, we basically approached the industry and said, and then Whole Foods was asking us, how would we do this? And we said, this is actually big, and even you, Whole Foods, who are the 800-pound gorilla in the organic industry, it's too big for you. This has to be done as an industry-wide initiative because it's so complex. And fortunately, we had support from senior executives at Whole Foods, support from the CEO of United Natural Foods, and we basically together decided to form something called the Non-GMO Project. And the Non-GMO Project, would work with us to create a standard on how you would evaluate products for being non-GMO, so you could basically give them a seal that they could carry, verifying that they were a non-GMO. And up to that point, our expertise was in commodity crops, again, as soy and corn and all that. And we knew more about that than just about anybody in the country or in the world, but no one had created this product ingredient standard before. So we worked together, and we brought in stakeholders from every piece of the industry, which included farmers and retailers and manufacturers and NGOs, and took a couple of years to get all their input on the standard. And we came out with this seal for the Non-GMO Project. And so in the early going, there were actually even elements of the organic industry that really were opposed to it. But eventually we gained everyone's support. And today, although I'm no longer with the company, but the company, which is now called Food Chain ID, verifies about 50,000 products a year under that standard. And it became, a very, very successfully well-accepted, well-implemented third-party seal, for the food industry, which is an incredibly challenging thing to do. So we're really proud that we were able to do it. It really helped the entire food industry clean up contamination that was occurring around the world, because there were no standards. There could either be fraud, it could be inadvertent contamination, it could be sloppy practices. And, for us, we would actually go out and audit manufacturing plants, need proof of testing that was done to the standards that we believed it had to be. And so the seal itself was extremely rigorous and meaningful. And we had a major impact on the global supply chain of non-GMO ingredients.
One of the things I just heard you say that I wanted to check out with you is it seems like there's a theme through you going to Fairfield, Iowa, the TM University, the intentional community that grew up there, and how you're talking about your businesses in the sense of intentionality, community, networking. And I just find that interesting. You talked about that more specifically just now, but I have a feeling that has probably been part of how you have created and worked in your various businesses. You were just talking specifically about bringing in like every aspect of the food work, from farmers to consumers to stores, et cetera. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because it feels like coming full circle and, honoring the intentionality of how everyone has something to offer.
I think that's a very deep, insightful observation. I think it mattered a lot for me and for the success. We had different ventures, that we had a community of, in many cases, like-minded individuals who, whether they were meditating or not meditating, believed in the mission of what we were doing and supported the mission. Now, with my other companies, there was no great deep mission other than we had a good product or good service. We want to get it out there. But certainly where it was all good. But certainly with genetic ID and then food chain ID, that really was very much a mission-driven company, where we defined our mission as supporting the production of safe, ethical, and sustainable food.
That's
and eventually we developed one of the world's largest certification standards for sustainable agriculture, particularly in the soy and sugar industries. And what that meant was no child labor, no forced labor, sustainable agronomic practices, and very importantly, no soybeans that were grown in land illegally cleared in the Amazon. So, preserving the Amazon rainforest. So everything we did, and we did diversify into lots of other parts of the food industry, and everything was to do kind of life-supporting work, in that industry.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a steady mission in the background right from the beginning of things that attracted you were things that would make a positive difference in the world. And that seems like that has led you from one place to another. But not in a straight line. This is one of the things that struck me, is that it's not a straight line here. It's like you went to school and learned how to do programming so that you could make a living, but it didn't lead you to programming. It led you to, through programming, but, to come out the other side of it. So it's like looks to me from looking at it from the outside, like a non-linear blossoming, which is how blossoms work, is that blossoms aren't linear. They, a little bit grows over here, then a little bit grows over there, and then it gets bigger, kind of like working on your pickleball game. I had to throw that in. But there was something else that you said that I think is really important to this question of oldishness, which is the flexibility and the being able to go in the direction where the sunlight is coming from, and not get stuck in necessarily in various places. You had a business that went away on you at the same time as a new business was coming in that was really really the big picture that you've been wanting to do all those years. And that's, to me, is what is oldishness, is that flexibility, the open-mindedness and open-heartedness that allows you to see the next thing as something you want to do, as opposed to what's on Channel 4 right now.
I think what became clear to me as I got older, first I was in my 30s and I was in my 40s, and you're in your 50s, and hiring people over the years, that you definitely, as you interviewed older people, that you could get a sense of whether they had calcified or not, and that calcification. And so it certainly wasn't in terms of age discrimination; it was in terms of perceiving whether someone had typically it had to do with how they led their life. If they were hard drinkers, or whatever it was, didn't get enough sleep for years on time. People, their ability to think flexibly and creatively and be energetic would get affected over time. And I hired people before I had more wisdom about that, just because their resume looked good and they sounded good, and then found, or after a certain period of time, that that whatever they had done in the past, they didn't have that anymore. And of course, I certainly have hired people who are a lot older than me who had it in spades. So it's but it's something, and I certainly we all recognize as we get older, we do change, but it doesn't mean that the change is better or worse. It's just different in terms of how we function. And I certainly think I try to play to my strengths now, and things I either want to do or don't want to do anymore, or things that I think things that I don't think I do as well as I did when I was younger. But I also know I have the wisdom and the vision to bring to any situation that younger people don't have. So things definitely change as you get older, and it certainly became an interesting experience as I got into my 60s, and then I worked up till I was about 68 full time at Food Chain ID, and then soon you're like the oldest guy in the room. You're the only guy with gray hair, and I never thought that I would see a real generation gap. We felt there was that between us and our parents in the 70s, but I never thought I would have that with my kids or with younger generations. And but the fact is, things change so fast and so dramatically now that there is a difference in the way people think, and what their priorities are, and what they're attracted to, and all kinds of things. And you do see that, those differences. So and again, I think the important thing is to not judge them as being better or worse. They're just different. And just as we were a very different generation, when our baby boomer generation started to have influence, in business and leadership positions, the older generation, kind of frowned and, you guys weren't in World War II, and, you didn't have lived through the Depression, and, how could you possibly do anything of value? And of course, we had a huge impact everywhere with a different set of values. But I think part of the oldish experience is that seeing that, you truly do have different experiences than the different cohorts that are coming through. And, I have daughters who are 34 and 36, and, we laugh about a lot of these things together. I love to make fun of my wife and I, and out of touch we are with this or that and the other, and we can all laugh about it. But there are differences. So, but I think certainly as a business person and a manager and an entrepreneur, I think, that it certainly balances out the idea of wisdom and experience, and been through the wars, been there, done that, and the wisdom that all accrues to you is very, very real and really, really valuable. And I've been on a lot of boards, and I've founded the Fairfield Entrepreneur Association 30 years ago, which functioned for about 25 years. And so I've been involved with, advising and helping out younger entrepreneurs. I'm still on a number of boards, and still invest in startups, and I love to talk to people who are starting their companies and see if I can be useful in some way. In some ways, they completely run circles around me in certain areas, but in other ways, there's a wisdom I can bring to them that can, help them grow. So
Ken, as we begin to wind down towards the end of this really fascinating episode, we want to make sure to ask you, as you are moving through now the 70s, what are anything that scares you about this time, and what are things about this time of being oldish that excites you?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's a very poignant time of life. And by that, I mean, you have friends who are passing, you have friends who are ill and seriously ill. You have friends who have gotten kind of debilitating diseases. And then you have friends who are healthy and functioning and doing great. But it's very poignant because almost everyone knows somebody in one of those categories that's close to them. And I have several people that for me, that have either passed or are really facing some serious challenges. So that's poignant. And I certainly feel very fortunate to still have the energy and the clarity and the interest and excitement to still want to do things. But at the same time, I don't want to take on a full-time role at this point, where I'd have things I might take on, but I don't want to be dealing with kind of personnel issues and operational issues and customer service. There are other people who can do that now. But to me, the fun of business, the creativity of business, the challenge of business, and to me, all the fun of business is what I call creative problem solving. There's always issues, there's always problems, and getting together with a bunch of people in the room and figuring it out is, that is the most satisfying part of business. And even with genetic ID and food chain ID, we had at least 4 what I call near-death experiences along the way. And we easily could have been put out of business during any one of those. And we, as a team, we figured it out and we solved it, and we made it through. And we eventually, I think, I've told Greg, we are purchased by a private equity company in 2013, and they sold us to a second private equity company in 2017, and then it was sold to a third private equity company in 2021. So today the company has 600 employees. We're in 30 different countries. They've made 14 acquisitions. Wow. And so, it's something we're really happy to see and very proud of. But it certainly was not a straight line. There were lots of times where it looked like maybe we might not make it. And so looking back on life, at this point, I certainly feel it's fantastic to be able to work half-time, to be able to come into the office when I want to. I might have a meeting set up or something at that schedule, but other than that, if I want to schedule pickleball in the morning or pickleball in the afternoon or pickleball at night, and work my schedule around that, I have the flexibility to do that. And one of the greatest things to me, and I have to say, if I can put in my pickleball segment now, I played basketball, 3 times a week, all the way up till I was 68. And then I broke a rib. And then a few months later, came back. And then a few months after that, broke another rib. And I said, okay, there's a message here. That's time to stop. And friends have been lobbying me to try pickleball for 2-3 years. And I just didn't feel I had the time to fit something else into my schedule. And so I finally took up pickleball and just absolutely loved it. I was a tennis player when I was younger, so it wasn't that hard to kind of get the basics. But once you get the basics, it still takes a long time to get good at it. And but more than anything, it was a social experience in pickleball. And I think for oldish people, to have something, you get together with another group, and we'll often have 4, 8, 12 players. At our we have a regular Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday morning kind of matches, and then others spread out throughout the week. And it's men and it's women, and it's never. Most of us are oldish, but we have a few younger people as well who kind of fit in there. And then the really young people have gone off to their own universe because we can't keep up with them. But that social aspect, have something that you can work at and keep getting better at, but more and more than that, just something that you can just laugh together with a group of people. It's just
Yes.
a fantastic, unique aspect to pickleball.
So in our oldishness, all three of us have developed what I think of it as Maharishi used to talk about consciousness and the different stages of consciousness, and I think we've all grown into the pickleball consciousness stage. And there's almost no difference between this and enlightenment. It's just you are when you're playing, you're just there. So anyway, so I don't think pickleball is necessary to be oldish, but it certainly helps. And certainly, and we wouldn't have met if it weren't for pickleball. I don't think. If I when I was in Fairfield getting a tour of the university, if I'd have said, I'm kind of interested in ice cream. You got anybody around here that knows about ice cream? Yes, But the subject of pickleball came up, and it was immediate. The Bill who was giving me the tour said, "Oh yeah, I don't play, but call this guy. He plays all the time." So
Yeah.
we wouldn't have met, and I wouldn't have gone back to Fairfield. I tried to play there. I wouldn't have gone back, except that I knew that you were there, and we'd have an opportunity to play together. So, there's definite social benefits to it, and that the laughing is. I think in one of the episodes I talked about, or one of the YouTubes that I listen to a lot, a guy named Tony Roy came up with a question. It's like, why do you play? So in all his teachings and trainings that he and his partner always ask the group of people, why do you play? And people say, laughing and social and getting out of the house and having fun and getting exercise and all this. He said that they had never, in asking that question for 2 years of hundreds of people, nobody had ever said they play to win. And that's a whole different attitude than pickleball. It's like, yeah, we already won. We're playing, we're running around, so we already won.
Yeah, I find that I like to win. Winning is more fun than not winning, but I don't carry it over for 1 second past the end of a game. I'm there, I'm focused, I'm trying to win, but the game's over, click rackets, you're done, you're on to the next game.
That's right.
Yes.
That's, it's, you're very kind of unattached. I've had people ask me, I love golf. I was an avid golfer. I still play, but haven't played as much this year as in the past. But people have said to you, what do you like better, pickleball or golf? And I say, I love golf, but golf is the whole day thing. You get up in the morning, you drive, and we typically have to drive about an hour to a course. You play all day, and you're with 4 guys, and if they're friends of yours, that's fun. But I said, with pickleball, you get out there. I drive 3 minutes to do a court. You have 8 or 12 different people, and you're all mixing it up and having a good time, and then you're done, and it's great fun and great. There are times when I've chosen pickleball over golf, which my friends were shocked when I said that. And the other thing I said is that, with basketball, as much as I loved it, said, frankly, if I could go back today and feel physically able to play basketball, which I could if I wanted to now, bunch of sweaty old guys bumping into each other and kind of, and it just doesn't have the same social thing. And I think the one thing that was unintentional, but is real about pickleball is because the court is so small and you're all right on top of each other. You're having a very intimate experience, with dinking, with everything. So, when someone does an incredible shot, you're all kind of amazed. We were joking the other day because someone was, going like this, they just hit such a great shot. And we said, hey, there's no excessive displays of emotion allowed on the court. For that shot, you can do it. It was that good. But that there's so much of that goes either, of course, you just slam it right into the net on the most obvious, easy shot in the world. You want to shoot yourself, and then you dive for something and you make some incredible shot. And everyone appreciates it and enjoys it together. So there's just nothing like that in any other sport I've played.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about it is I've seen this more than once where you make an incredible shot and the opposition does that excited dance.
Right.
The people that you just beat,
right,
they appreciate that shot. And that doesn't happen in any other sport that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
well,
I agree.
Yeah, so that's great.
That's been a great addition to my life.
I'm going to jump in because I know we need to end. But I just was thinking about, Ken, what you said about going through resumes and noticing people that were older, and use the term calcified. And so I just want to end by saying that all the things you've been talking about, being involved in sharing your wisdom, being involved in pickleball, and it helps us to not be calcified. It helps us to stay active in our minds and to be involved in our communities. So, and that's a big piece of, as we move through aging, to help us stay centered and together with each other.
Absolutely.
I agree. Ken, you're one of the least calcified people I've met.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much. It's just been fascinating to hear your journey and all that's come of that in your life. And thank you for spending this time with us.
My pleasure. Thank you. It was a great meeting and playing with Greg. And I think what you guys are doing with your podcast is, it's a great little niche that you're focusing on there. That it's a nice conversation, for people to be having around this.
I hope that we'll continue to be in touch. This is great.
Great. Well, I hope you come through again and we have a chance to whack around that pickleball again. Well, I look forward to seeing how it turned out, and
yes,
let my wife listen to it.
Yes.
Well, say hello to her for
Bye.
us, and bye, Ken.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Ken Ross for joining us. If you enjoyed our conversation, please tell a friend. You can leave a comment on our website. You can find links to more info about Maharishi International University in the show notes. This would be a great time to buy Aaron McHugh's book, Pickleball is Life, as a gift for someone you know who loves pickleball, using our link in the show notes. We hope to have at least one more conversation before the holidays. We'll be in touch.